So I think that by now people must have studied the case study. Let me know when I can take up the start the discussions on it, or take up any other question based on whatever we had discussed up till now.
Ma'am, you can start the discussion.
Okay, thank you. So this case study is primarily about the comfort women, right? So you would find that this idea of the comfort women is associated with an exploitation of women's body. So you would find that the idea of comfort women is not new. It has all women's body has always been a site of exploitation for warriors, for those clans who have been victorious. So, before I continue my discussion further, I would invite some questions and insights and comments from the participants about this idea of whether a woman's body can be or should be treated as a site for victimization by the victor's armies, and to what extent it impacts women, and how do we create systems in order to fight against it.
If anyone wishes to engage with Professor Vishnu, you can raise your hands and we'll enable your mics.
Okay, so this case study starts with the discussion of the Statue of Peace and controversies related with it. So, you would find that history has its ways of responding to violence by different ethnicities. Can you cite some other examples also of wars where women have been victimized? For the discussion also, if you can scroll this case study towards the bottom, you would find that for the discussion we have opened three different perspectives. So can I request the organizers to scroll it down so that we can look at the points for discussion? Yes, thank you. So the first point, and there is a person whose hand is raised, so if you can allow that person.
Ma'am, we've allowed them. Arunima, please.
Yes, either type your question or please ask.
Hello,
Yes,
hello.
yes, you are audible.
Hello, good afternoon, ma'am.
Very good afternoon to you, Arunima.
Ma'am, I would like to ask you regarding the victimization of women uh, in the perspective of Afro-American scenario, like in the works of Toni Morrison, mm, the traumatic conditioning of women uh, that will correlate with this comfort women and all.
Okay. Would you like me to specifically cite parallels from any particular work of Toni Morrison?
Ma'am, I think Toni Morrison's Beloved is quite apt for representing this kind of uh, thing.
Okay,
If you'd like to share some, please go ahead.
okay. So you would find that comparisons when we talk about the victimization of a woman's body, uh, as our previous discussion has suggested, is rooted in the interconnectedness of things. For example, when Toni Morrison or other African American women writers have talked about the systems of slavery and its dehumanizing impact on women. We have to look at the contemporary realities where men as well as women were sold as animals or any other objects. So we find that on the one hand, we have the slavers who procure those human beings as if they are animals, they are treated badly, and at the same time, women become basically, the provider of new slaves for them. So you would find that this aspect of slavery and its traumatizing and inhumane conditioning is recorded by different writers. What is so important in Beloved? We find that, as studies tell us, Beloved is based on a real life incident where an erstwhile woman who was able to escape to the northern parts of America was free for some time, had ultimately tried to kill her own children, and Beloved is based on this true story. The actual slave woman had said that she does not want her own children, her own daughters to face the fate she herself had faced. So you will find that this is the worst type of treatment which can be given to a woman where her body and her soul is exploited without her consent, without any willingness on her part. And this aspect has not changed. It does not change, whereas other aspects may change. In Beloved and in similar other works by Toni Morrison and other writers, we find that this issue of slavery has been taken up and how it was rooted in the economic exploitation. If we look at this idea of comfort women, which is presented in this case study, we find that it is rooted in the behavior of a particular army. But we find that in every army, except the Indian army, I would say per se, this behavior has often been presented. We find that there are several works by German writers who have recorded the realities of the Second World War. And in the fictional treatment of women, they have said that every army had behaved in a similar manner as far as a woman's body was concerned. And this is something which goes on historically. And there are several examples where enmity is ultimately unfolded on the body of a woman. So, similarities in what ways? Similarities in the aggression on a woman's body or similarity in the background? Whatever the similarity or dissimilarity is there in the background, we find that the impact on the woman is always the same. We find that she has to face the brutality of this process. She has to face this trauma on her physique, on her mental health also. And it is this aspect which remains common. And the ethics of transnational feminist writers is to maintain solidarity so that we can create systems to comfort somehow these women who have been exploited and enable them to create a meaningful life once this impact of trauma is over. This does not satisfy you. So, in which direction should I take this discussion further? Something more about
No, ma'am,
Beloved?
that's it.
Okay,
No, ma'am, that's very.
thank you. But you would find that Beloved is a novel which is very close to my heart.
Ma'am, same here. It's both on. I'm going to compare it on every aspect, like Indian scenario or Afro-American. How to compare women of traumatic conditioning on different levels.
Yes, that is very true. That is very true. And you would find that if you have to compare the brutality on a woman's body, then I would request you to go through the work by Urvashi Butalia. You have referred to the Indian context, and you would find that it is a meaningful book for you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for something
There's
that way.
another hand
That
which
was
I
really
look
good.
at. Thank you, Ranima. You can discuss it later on also by sending a mail to me. There's another person whose hand I see.
Paridhi, you can speak.
Yes. Ma'am, I was thinking about the medieval times per se, where the knighthood was connected with the idea of treating women's body as an object and connected with the idea of uh, um winning the women's body per se. And then eventually they through literature only, as we see in the medieval era, particularly European literature, we see how they actively challenge that notion, and the sensibilities seem to change over time with the idea of self fashioning and all of that. I wonder how these sensibilities then seem to reverse over the period of time, like we see now as well globally. For I am particularly mentioning the American changes in the rights of women's autonomy. How do these sensibilities then keep changing when we have already addressed them?
This is something which is very interesting because when we look at the development of feminism, about 100 years or 130 years back, women were fighting for the same right. They were asking for the right for the medical termination of pregnancy. I think this is the controversy you are talking about. Because in recent America, in the context of feminism and gender related laws, there have been two major changes. The first is that MTP is not allowed in certain states, and this is something for which the feminist movements are gathering. But somehow we find that this fight has not been able to catch the popular imagination. So the media attention is not on this basic right which has been denied to women. Then the second controversy is the recent one in which the President Trump has signed an order denying the alternate gender X in the latest applications for passports, etc., to American citizens. Okay, so this still has to, unfold further so that we can talk about it much more in detail. But it is, really baffling in many ways, and some critics have linked it to the way in which the modernist societies are giving ways to postmodernism. So we talk about various impacts of postmodernism on our society. Can you name any? What are the characteristics of postmodern societies before I connect this idea with your question further? Postmodern attitude is about, yes,
Ma'am,
yes,
I believe it's about fluidity, interconnectedness, intersexuality, and all of that.
yes.
I believe that these are the major post modern societies. Also, of course, capitalism, which takes forward eventually.
True. Another aspect which is often not talked about deliberately or indeliberately is the rise in fundamentalism. This is also an after effect of postmodernism. In modernism, we find that the binary definitions were very important and they had to be followed. When we talk about the absence of binary, we talk about the plurality. We also have to understand that all pluralities cannot be rational. There would be some irrational aspects also to our acceptance of plurality. And this existence of, let us say, an excessive idea, the highly patriarchal society, social norms is another thing. When we look at the social media nowadays, we find that there is a lot of talk about masculinities, and some of you might be familiar with the name of Alan Tate because we find that he also has talked about biological essentialism in today's time and has become a very popular figure in America. So you would find that Alan Tate is not the only one. Yes, this comment is very right, alpha masculinity. So we find that in social media also this emphasis on alpha masculinity is something which has become highly popular. And at the same time, we find that fundamentalism in various religions is also growing, and it is also connected with the development of postmodern societies. So, I would also be in a position to send you certain references which you can cross check further for connecting these two dots. So, you would find that there are societies which are otherwise considered to be liberal, but at the same time, we find that women's rights, several aspects are not there. Some of you might remember the case of an Indian dentist woman who had gone to Ireland, I think a couple of years back, was pregnant, and because of some certain accident, doctors had advised a medical termination of pregnancy. The husband had immediately agreed to it, the family had immediately agreed to it, but the Irish laws did not allow it. And the woman in turn died. She died because the law of the country did not allow a medical termination of pregnancy. So, to what do we attribute this thing? So, this is strange to me also that in 1920s and 1930s, we read the history of those women doctors who were running parallel clinics so that women can be given this assistance in termination of pregnancy, unwanted pregnancy. Now again, after 100 years, the same fight is there. But there is a difference. In 1930s, women had the popular support. Now they don't. Why? I don't have any answer to this why. Yes, there is another very detailed, discussion on this. I'll read it out. How do the governmental sponsorship and political position of comfort women peace statues in the US and Germany, both nations with their own histories of wartime sexual violence, reflect a strategic erasure of American and German military sexual crimes in Vietnam, China, and Korea? In what ways does the selective historical memorialization commodify women's histories and bodies as tools for geopolitical narratives, particularly when these decisions are still largely controlled by predominantly, let's say, okay, I think the rest of it we can use. So you would find that there is a threat of employment of these transnational feminist solidarity acts as tools to propel political motives, which are not aligned with feminist objectives. Now, you would find that wartime crimes have been a part of, let us say, our history everywhere. Not only the wartime crimes against women's body, which you have written in your comment about women in Vietnam, China, and Korea. What about the crimes on Indian women during the colonial era? That was also a fact which is never recorded by the British historians. British children are not taught in their history about the exploitation which we Indians had to go through. And then it becomes selective amnesia in certain cultures, in certain countries. But at the same time, if you look at the alternate histories, for example, write-ups by the Vietnamese writers or Chinese or Korean writers, you would find that there is a record, fictional or non-fictional record of these wartime crimes. But then you would find that in the system of neo-colonial era, which is supported by so many interconnections about which we have talked in our discussions earlier, it is a very complex issue because feminist solidarity is also treated as an agenda by certain people. So you will find that when I discuss these issues with my own students in IIT, I also tell them that the legal definitions and the legal status of things also becomes important. And I always cite, this example of, the earlier question by Pariti that in America women are fighting for a right which was given to them, and why do they not have the common political will to fight against it? Okay. So at the same time, you would find that history is selective. All of us talk about it. And therefore, we find that a post historical understanding of things becomes important. And herein, the role of fiction, the role of literature also becomes important because, in many ways, it suggests a parallel history, a parallel memory recorder, which is important for us. Nobody can really defend any type of crime, particularly against those helpless women, which had not been a part of any criminal. It remains ultimately unanswered because when we try to attempt answering these questions, we enter a do loop actually. Here we go in circles. So there is one more hand which I look at.
Yashika, you may ask your question.
Hi, ma'am. Since we were talking about transnational feminism and especially sexual violence against women by the military, I was reminded of the violence the tribal women who face by the policemen. Like there was recently a case where in Chhattisgarh, women were sexually assaulted and raped by the policemen who were there to like quell the anti-Maoist movement. And these women do not have it. There is a very low literacy rate among these women. So how do we address these questions?
See, again, you would find that if we look at it theoretically, like theoretically and then practically. So, theoretically, also, we find that the transnational feminist framework enables us to understand the significance of intersectionality. As you have pointed out, there has been a lack of literacy amongst women. There is an economic backwardness in the section, and at the same time, you would find that this isolation being, you see, because of their own tribal existence. So you would find that these facts are also important, and therefore the brutality of any force, systematic force, or let us say the non-systematic government or non-government agency becomes much more important because these women unfortunately do not have the tools to fight them. And therefore, you would find that it is doubly important for us to create those systems in which these women can freely talk about their atrocities and the society as a whole is able to generate a system of support for them. But you will find that, as I had said earlier, history has very strange ways. National histories have very strange ways of remembering things, certain things, and not remembering certain things. For example, what has happened in Kashmiri Hindu exodus, where women were exploited. Right, so we find that the memory about that is fresh. What has happened in 1970 war in Bangladesh, and now the citizens of Bangladesh want to erase that history consciously. Whereas, in my generation, we remember it, like it was a first-hand experience for my generation. But I think by the time we come to your generation, there would be an eraser of these atrocities in Bangladesh. So you would find that these are certain things which have to be remembered, and it is the role of literature, of humanities, in fact, like people who are working in related fields, to create memories so that the alternative histories are also available to researchers. So there is one more hand which is there. We go into very treacherous things now.
Shrikala, you may speak.
Yashi, you had asked a very sensitive question. There are no clear answers. We can suggest some ways, but I find that the reality is very different. I agree with you.
Shrikala, are you there? Please unmute yourself. Ma'am, you can take up the question in the chat. There's a question in the chat.
Okay, ma'am. Yes, Srijita, this comment is very right. So, women's bodies have always been subjected to the jurisdiction of the state. For that matter, if we are talking about the jurisdiction of the state, we find that the bodies of men, bodies of people with alternate sexualities have also been subjected to the jurisdiction of the state. What is particular in the case of women is that women have to face certain types of exploitations which are really rooted in their bodies. And it is not only the jurisdiction of the state, but the unsaid jurisdiction of the patriarchal forces also which they have to face. So now uh, I don't know whether you are familiar with the scientist that was Alan Turing. I don't know whether you are familiar with this case or not. Alan Turing was a scientist who is responsible for the victory of Britain and America in the Second World War against the Nazi forces. He is considered to be the father of AI, right? Because his work was so important that he had thought of the initial computers and is the father of artificial intelligence. So, in my institute, everybody is familiar with the work of Alan Turing. Now, you have talked about the body being subject to the jurisdiction of the state. Now, Alan Turing had openly admitted to his alternate sexuality, right? That was in 1940s, at a time when it was a crime in Britain. So he was artificially, medically, like treated so that he can be cured of this disease, of openly accepting himself to possess an alternate sexuality. And then as a result, he died. So he died at a very young age. Whereas, his contribution is still recorded. So had the state not subjected his body to its jurisdiction at that time, we find that his contribution could have been much more helpful to the humanity. So when we talk about women, we find that it is not only women whose body is at mercy of the jurisdiction of the state. Everybody is at the mercy of the jurisdiction of the state. Women are also open to patriarchal systems as well as alternate sexualities. Um, Sexual brutality of Draupadi in Mahashweta Devi. Draupadi was viewed as comfort women on the stage. Okay, now this is very interesting thing, Draupadi. Now, Draupadi, I'm not familiar with Mahashweta Devi's depiction of Draupadi, though I have read several other works by Mahashweta Devi. And I remember the basic story of Draupadi, like having gone through it through various other sources, including the original depiction in Mahabharata. And let me tell you that I have read the original Mahabharata in Sanskrit, so I know what was the original version. Now, Draupadi is often questioned because she had to marry five brothers, right? So, this is a practice which sociologically has continued in certain sections of the society, right? So, you would find that still in India, in Nepal also, there are certain segments in which this practice is not considered to be a very obsolete one, though gradually it is practically out of existence, but still we come across these examples. So we do not know for sure what were the sociological conditions. But of course, she had to face the brutality in many ways. Not only through the institution of marriage, if we judge it by today's standards, but also because she had to openly face this insult in the Rajya Sabha, in this court of Dhritarashtra. So you would find that although we cannot treat her as a comfort woman because she was never at the mercy of the general people per se, but then um, this was like we if we judge it from today's standards, this brutality is manifold. And even if there are some critics and people who can justify her marriage to five brothers simultaneously, we find that nobody can justify the brutal behavior she had to face in the life court. Srijata, Devashish, this is a contentious question which you have asked because we find that in the portrayal of Draupadi, we also cannot put her out of context. See, this Mahabharata uh, puts us, in a particular sociological context. This context, which was like a very different type of a society, the intrigues of the royal court, where women were not only at the receiving end, but they were also actively planners of different types of atrocities on other men and women. Mahabharata also tells us about Shikhandi. So you would find that the treatment of the alternate sexualities also finds some mention in Mahabharata. So the contemporary situation, the contextual understanding of things is very important. At the same time, the previous question about how these, worldviews change is important. So now this is a very interesting question by Anushruti. As Anushri. So as researchers, how are we supposed to isolate our research from our own experiences of identity when discussing problems of the communities or sub-communities we ourselves belong to? To what extent can a researcher's personal experience of discrimination allow the direction of their research in the more indigenous perspectives? In order to answer the question, I will have to first ask the question, what exactly do you understand by the word research? Research is objective. It is supposed to be objective. Whereas we find that our experiences are subjective. Our experiences are not invalid. They are what they have made us today, right? We are a product of our own experiences. But at the same time, we find that in research, in pure academic research, our subjective experiences should not have any role. It can at best lead us to look at a situation with more empathy, but while we are discussing it, the discussion itself, the analysis should be totally objective. So empirical understanding is the most commonly defined feature of academic research. So what do you mean by empirical understanding? Now, I am in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, right? So, with complete respect to people of social sciences. Now, social sciences do a lot of surveys, right? The research is based on surveys. 80% of the people feel it, 30% of people feel it, right? So, what is this coverage of data? So, you would find that the researches in social sciences, empirical or not empirical, right? When we talk about common understandings, then it becomes rather questionable. So, what is your core area of research? Anushri, if I can ask you. In literature, we talk about things which may be of use to us immediately or perhaps after 50 years. We talk about permanent value systems. In other subjects, we are governed by the salability of an idea, the salability of certain things, right? So you would find, let me finish this idea and then I will come to the last comment. So you would find that there is a basic difference in approach towards research in humanities and other areas. And here I am dissociating the research in pure humanities from the research in social sciences, in physical sciences, and other areas. Why? Because you would find that in humanities, we talk about the possibilities of value systems which never go out of fashion, which guide us in our moments of crisis. We may require them tomorrow, we may not require them at any time in our life, but the permanence remains. The solution does not get wrong. On the other hand, you conduct a survey today, you change the sample size, the sample geography, the results would be different. So you will find that you know, I am a person of literature, so I talk about those systems which have certain permanence as far as values are concerned. And therefore, I will not go into whether empirical understanding is the most commonly defined feature of academic research or not. No, I am not capable enough to comment on it. Now, the next is sexual well-being in Indian women in the psychosocial context that affects them. Okay, sorry. So you are into social sciences, right? Not literature. And therefore you would find that you have made this type of a comment. And I think that I have answered it. I know that you will not agree to it. One more hand is there.
Shrikala, are you there?
See, our
Ma'am,
values should never interfere with our research work. Academic research is a very serious task, and academic research should also be a guidance to other people in terms of value systems. I understand that we can never be fully objective in our attitude towards those questions which are dear to us, right? But then we can at least try to be objective enough to accommodate different perspectives and then also defend our choice. If we have chosen solution A, then why? Why have we treated it as a better suggestion than solution B? So you would find that our own values should not impact the research direction or the authenticity and objectivity of research. This is a very critical question, and I know that from my personal experiences that people in social and behavioral sciences are never comfortable with this answer. Shrikala, can you please type the question?
ma'am, it appears that there are no more questions, so can we wind up?
It's entirely up to you. If there is any further question, I am here to respond to it. Also, I have shared my mail with you. So, even later on, if there is a participant who wants me to clarify a further doubt, please send a mail to me during, in the duration of this course or even after that. Okay.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, we will.
Thank you, Avi.
Uh, ma'am, shall we wind up the session?
Yes, we can.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much for your insightful lecture. We're sure all the participants appreciated your insights into transnational feminism and
I
how it sort of fits
enjoyed the
together.
questions, I would say, because they show that how insightful and how dedicated you are towards your own areas, your own research. So I am thankful to you for giving me this opportunity to at least hold some discussions with such young, brilliant minds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
We miss.
We are sure that the participants join you in the assertion that we should strive for a solidarity that celebrates differences rather than erasing them altogether.
Yes.
We are very thankful for your participation, ma'am.
Thank you. So can I log out now?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be ending the session now, but we will meet again at 2:30 to continue with the next session as planned. Thank you so much.